to the Martin E. Segal Theater Center here at the Writers Center CUNY, and thank you for taking time out of your for sure busy lives to be with us. This actually, after our Prelude Festival, is the opener of our fall season, and we think it's a very, very important and significant event tonight. It is the O'Neill Center, a safe haven for playwrights. It is part of a season, a series we did about places where playwrights really do come and develop their work, like Julia, the dramatist, the MCC Playwrights Collision, and of course the O'Neill Center is right in the center in America, I think, with their work, and they have a great tradition, and they're doing great work now, and we will see what ideas are coming out and how to connect also with them and what the application process is. My name is Frank Henschke. I'm the Executive Director and Director of Programs here at the Segal Theater Center. And next to me is Helen Shore, who's a co-director of the programs, and she will guide us through the evening. Tonight she's also a theater critic and a writer and a curator. She was part of the Prelude Festival. We had 2,500 people visit us last week or the week before for our event. The Segal Center bridges academia and professional theater, international and American theater, and O'Neill is also someone in his work in life has really done this, so we feel very close, and we are really curious to learn more about this great institution. I would like to welcome some of our Segal Center scholars who are here, also from Japan, from Jordan, from China, and many other guests who I see here. So again, thank you for coming. I always do say we need great theater, but we really need also a great audience, and I think our evenings hoped to contribute a little bit. After this event here, we will have a little reception in honor of the O'Neill Center, so a little table will come here, we're going to have a little drink, and hopefully you will be around if people have questions, how to connect, how to come, if they want to know more, then I hope you will have a little bit of time to be here. My last thing is, if you have a cell phone, please do take it out and make sure it is sound off. And this is especially for the speakers on the panel, it has to be completely powered off because we have wireless microphones. So now I hand over to Helen, and thank you so much for your time and attention.
So I am, as Frank said, in my other life, I am a critic. And before that, I was a dramaturg. And dramaturgy is a sort of a hidden art, full of passionate but invisible people. And there is a sort of a mythos among the dramaturgical community about a place, a kind of a terabithia, a sacred spot where the work still goes on, and it's the O'Neill. And so even before I came to New York, I've been hearing about the O'Neill as a place where the actual progress of making a place for American plays to be excellent, to be worked on collaboratively and generously, and in a place that was so safe, in fact, that you cannot even get a cell phone service signal there. And it really is, when you see images of it, you realize that it is a very special kind of sacred spot. So, as Frank said, we're very, very privileged to have them here to talk about their work and also to give us some glimpses of the great works that are coming our way. So I'd like to introduce Wendy Goldberg, who will walk us through the life of the center, and then she will tell us what comes next. But to spoil the secret for you, it is 3 fantastic segments of plays. Okay, Wendy Goldberg.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I just want to take a moment and thank the Segal Center for hosting us and having us here. It's a real honor and thrill for us to be a part of the season and open the season here. I also want to just take a moment and thank all of the people at the O'Neill staff, Jill Anderson, our general manager, Jeremy Ladiga, Paulette Haupt, who runs our National Music Theater Conference, and all of the artists who are going to be participating tonight. I thank everyone for being with us and for making this a special evening. I wanted to start off, before I talk a bit about what we do at the National Playwrights Conference and at the O'Neill, by telling you what some other people have said about what we do at the O'Neill. The first quotation I wanted to read to you is from August Wilson, who first visited the O'Neill in 1982. His play, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which went on to much acclaim, we found it in our open submission process at the O'Neill. Before August Wilson came to the O'Neill, he was a short order cook in Minneapolis, and of course went on to have one of the most prestigious careers a dramatist in this country or in the world could ever have. So August Wilson said, "The O'Neill. I first went with Ma Rainey's Black Bottom when it was a 59-page, ill-organized script. The important thing I learned was to rewrite, not just patchworking here and fixing there, but exactly what that word means, rewriting. When you write, you know where you want to go. You know what a scene, a particular speech is supposed to accomplish. Then I discovered that it's possible to go back and rewrite this speech, to find another way to say it, and I learned to respect that strange trust that gets built, that it will carry, and the stage will carry your ideas. The intensity of the O'Neill process, working in 4 days, working fast, was also an amazing experience. It comes down to problem solving, but there's no one correct solution." August Wilson then, of course, his home, his artistic home was really at the O'Neill, and certainly at Yale Rep, but he came to the O'Neill in various forms. He came in 1982, in 1983, 84, 86, 87, 1994. Every piece of his has had some time at the O'Neill, whether he ended up doing something publicly or he was a writer in residence at the time. The National Playwrights Conference, which I'm here to talk to you about this evening, is the first and the oldest play development organization in the country. The O'Neill was the first professional conference established at the O'Neill Theater Center by our founder, George White, in 1965. But since the birth of our founding conference, the Playwrights Conference, the O'Neill Center now is home to other professional and academic programs, including the National Music Theater Conference that we're going to be talking about tonight, founded by Paulette Haupt, and Paulette has been leading the conference since the beginning, the National Theater Institute, which is our academic program that happens at the O'Neill, the National Puppetry Conference, the National Critics Institute, the summer home for the Commercial Theater Institute, and we also host a cabaret and performance conference that happens in August. The entire O'Neill Theater Center is guided by one mission: to serve as an educational and development center for both emerging and established theater artists. The Playwrights Conference at this point is almost 50 years old and has been led by 3 artistic directors during that time. The esteemed Lloyd Richards, who was the person that did find that script of August Wilson's in a batch of scripts. His tenure saw the discovery of August Wilson among many other playwrights. Jim Houghton, who is now the artistic director of the Signature Theater here in New York, and for the past 8 years, I have had the honor of leading the Playwrights Conference myself. Each summer, for almost 50 summers now, a community of professionals gather in our serene setting of the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center in Waterford, Connecticut. We sit right next to O'Neill's boyhood home. He grew up in New London, Connecticut, and he also spent much time on our grounds and on our beach in Waterford. We are there to support playwrights and new works for the theater. The National Playwrights Conference strives to create a supportive environment that empowers playwrights to their own process and to experience the play with a professional company of actors, directors, dramaturgs, and resident designers. In the years since its inception, the National Playwrights Conference has developed more than 600 plays. During the conference, our playwrights live on the grounds of the O'Neill for a full month and engage in a week-long process of rehearsals culminating in 2 script-in-hand public readings. Typically, up to 8 plays are selected for the intensive lab each summer, and our conference playwrights represent a wide range of experience, from both emerging writers to Broadway veterans. Directors and actors also have worked on and off Broadway, in film and regional theaters, and represent all kinds of, as I said, both seasoned as well as emerging artists. Virtually every major American playwright has been part of the conference, including, as I mentioned, August Wilson, David Henry Hwang, Lanford Wilson, Edward Albee, Wendy Wasserstein. The list goes on and on. In more recent years, Julia Cho, Rebecca Gilman, Regina Taylor, Adam Rapp, David Lindsay-Abaire. In addition to the writers who we select for the script-in-hand readings and for being part of our Summer Playwrights Conference, we also have writers who are in residence, who are just writing, not necessarily showing something publicly, but taking the space to write and dream and create. Recent summer resident writers have included Alfred Urey and Lisa Loomer and Tracy Scott Wilson. The conference participants, the people who are there for the entirety of the conference, they also have access to discussions with special guests. Past speakers have included playwrights Edward Albee, Ed Bullins, Romulus Linney, Paula Vogel, as well as Eugene O'Neill's biographers, Arthur and Barbara Gelb. Now, the plays come to the O'Neill in a very special way. They come to us via our open submission process. We open our doors and invite writers to submit work to us during the early part of the fall. It's typically, this year, the window is a little bit longer, and we happen to be sitting in it right this moment, and we'll talk more about that. Our literary manager, Ann Morgan, is here to also field some of those questions. But we're currently in that period. If you have written a play in English, a full-length play that has not yet had a professional production and hasn't yet had a lot of developmental work necessarily, you can submit it for consideration to the summer, for the summer season. And the plays come in during that month-long window for us. We typically receive about 1,000 scripts for, as I mentioned, 8 slots during the summer. We also try to reserve at least 1 slot for an invited artist. Sometimes that is an artist that we just invite to again, balance the artists that we have there, or sometimes it's an ongoing collaboration that we've had in the past with other producing organizations. We have continued this collaboration with the Goodman Theater in Chicago, and we have now developed 3 pieces with them, one of which you're going to hear tonight that is going to have its premiere at the Goodman in the spring. We develop, typically when you're there for the month, we develop 2 plays a week for the entire month of July. So the writers are in residence for the entire month, but the plays themselves, 2 plays each week, typically at the end of the week, you can come and watch what we've done and where we are with the scripts at that point. Our season is announced publicly by mid-April, and we then start teaming up the directors and actors and dramaturgs with the writers. The presentations I mentioned at the O'Neill are public, and they are not reserved only for our on-campus community. They are open to the public, and our rehearsals are open to everybody who is part of our summer season. They wear a name tag, and they can come into rehearsal to really cultivate an educational community for students and others to see how a rehearsal process, a professional rehearsal process works. I mentioned the timeline. I should go back, and we'll talk more about this when we talk with Anne and with Paulette. But we receive about 1,000 scripts right now from mid-September until this year, until October 26th, you can submit to the O'Neill. And then what happens is that our scripts get farmed out to an incredible team of readers. So they go out to the readers, and then what happens is that the scripts get narrowed down to a smaller grouping of scripts, and then we have a semifinalist round where we have an artistic council of people who are theater professionals from around the country. Every literary manager in the country is reading scripts for the O'Neill, I must say. And then we get the scripts down to a smaller batch, the finalist batch, which then I review with our literary office and ultimately make the final selections for the conference. But they go through, and as I mentioned, the submission process is a blind submission process. So we ask for a lot of information from the writers. We keep a lot of that information on file. We want to know where the play is at. We want to get a sense of if the writer has goals and vision for what is going to happen beyond, and how they would utilize their time at the O'Neill. We keep all of that information on file, but when we send the scripts out to our readers, all they have is the title of the play and the dramatis persona. They have no notion of who's written the script, and they have no other additional information. One of the most unique pieces of the O'Neill, which continues at this point in time around the country, there are so many developmental opportunities for playwrights. I mean, it's really, the O'Neill is the first, as I mentioned, but something that when I came into the O'Neill, I wanted to make sure that we kept a unique piece to it, that's something that we did differently than any other development organization does. And so in the Playwrights Conference, we do something that we call the Dream Design Meeting, which is, often I get asked, why do you have resident designers on staff when you are ultimately presenting, it's a 4-day rehearsal process with very quick turnaround. Why would you have resident designers as part of that process? But what we do is we sit down with the writers at the very beginning of the rehearsal, before they've actually even started with actors and a director, and we sit them down with a group of our resident designers, and we dream about what the play could look like ultimately down the line in production, which makes us very different than a literary conference. We are a theatrical conference. We're interested, we know that these plays are meant to be seen in 3D and have other elements. Not yet, they're not quite ready for those elements yet, but we want to empower the writer to take control of what those elements should be, what they think it should be, and also just ask a lot of questions about the world of the play and to really start getting a sense of that. And our designers are amazing. They do wonderful things, and most of them have been with us since the beginning of my tenure at least. And they provide the writer with a lot of visual research, all kinds of imagery and soundscapes and things for the writer to really consider and think about based off of what we call the Dream Design Meeting. It's an hour-long conversation. So that's something that's really quite unique to what we do. After the writers have been with us for the entire summer, or the entire 4 weeks of July, the final phase of our work in the last week of the conference is I sit down with each writer and talk about their experience, how the piece grew, what needs to happen in the next phase of development, and then we begin to formulate a very strategic list of theater companies where we feel the play could be produced, and we start to make phone calls and to really start advocating for the plays. The first part of it is to try to get the best people, the best team in the room when we're developing the work to do that advocating, to hook up the best dramaturg that would make the most sense to a particular story. Maybe they would go home, if they're on staff at another theater company, they would go home to that organization and rave about the play and say, we must produce this, this must happen. So the hope is that a lot of people in the room get very excited about the work and move forward and do that. But then, obviously, we take that very seriously. It's very important to me that we put plays into production, but we don't make that the emphasis of what we do during our time. It really is about getting the script to be the best it can be so that it's ready for a full production opportunity. But we are interested in moving plays forward, and in recent years, we've had a very strong track record of doing that. Some of the significant world premieres from the O'Neill Playwrights Conference, and Paulette will talk more about the Music Theater Conference, have been Rebecca Gilman's The Crowd You're In With, which was seen at the Goodman and the Magic Theater, Jason Grote's play 1001, which premiered at the Denver Center and has gone on to a life all over, including here in New York, Deborah Zoloffer's play End Days, Adam Bock's play The Receptionist, Anne Washburn's play A Devil at Noon, Gregory Moss's play The House of Gold, Julia Cho's play that was just seen at Roundabout, which won the Susan Smith Blackburn Award, The Language Archive. And this season, we are going to be seeing work happening all over the country with plays premiering across the country, including the Goodman, the Magic, Berkeley Rep, Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park. So I wanted to take a moment now and show you some of that work that is happening, is going to be happening, or is just in the process of happening. So I'd love to invite the actors for this evening up to sit behind me, and we'll get into the scene work. Thank you. Yes, thank you. All right. So our first piece that we're going to see tonight is from a play by Quiara Alegría Hudes, which is called The Happiest Song Plays Last. This play was developed in the 2011 National Playwrights Conference, and it will be seen in an upcoming world premiere at the Goodman Theater in Chicago. We describe the play like this. On a movie set in Jordan, a veteran relives his trauma while filming a war-themed blockbuster. In a humble kitchen in North Philadelphia, a woman feeds her hungry neighbors as she falls in love with a local musician. A tale of two cousins who span the globe in search of redemption, humility, and their place in the world. In this scene, Joaquin was well known in his community for playing folkloric Puerto Rican music on the cuatro, an instrument much like a guitar. Joaquin recently died a preventable death when he walked into a crumbling health clinic and was ignored while suffering a heart attack in the waiting room. In this scene, Joaquin's ghost visits a neighbor and dear friend, Yasmin.
What did it feel like? Sitting there alone in the hospital room? Was it painful? Was it scary? Did you finally realize you love me?
Like a friend.
Ugh, can't you lie to me in heaven? Just Lie to me a little. What was the last thing to go through your head?
Hearing Ramito lie.
Ay, Joaquin, wrong lie.
I was stuck in Puerto Rico after a canceled flight. Hurricanes. The entire island was blowing like a hairdryer on high. The airport was chaos. A man can only beg U.S. Air so many times. So I borrowed my cousin's neighbor's Volkswagen Rabbit. Poor machine could barely fart up a 10-degree incline. But I decided to drive the entire Ruta Panoramica solo on those four wheels. Pueblito after pueblito, strung together like green Christmas lights, palm trees, bamboo. I mean, I haven't seen a house for 40 minutes. I hang a hairpin and boom, there's a little hut sticking out on the side of the mountain, like a loose tooth poking into the sky. It looked like a little gust of wind might just take it away. Black smoke puffing out from the back.
Pig roast.
I'm thinking lunchtime, lechon time. I park. Pebbles tumbling off the cliff. I look down to see what's holding this casita up. 2 wooden posts stuck in the cliffside. So rotten, so crumbly they'd snap if a pelican landed. The sign above the door says, the Philadelphia Inn. Carajo, I'm going in. Dark place. How much for Corona? No Corona. How about a Heineken? No Heineken. Bartender points to the drink menu. Medallas in plastic cups, 1/4. Hurricane picking up outside. The floor is swaying like a fishing boat. I mean, the wind is screaming, and what do I hear? My anthem. The first Ramito song I ever laid ears on. A bolero dedicated to the bull that plowed his farm for so many years. The bull that he loved, who died. I heard it for the first and only time live in my tia's radio when I was a toothless kid. And I panicked and started crying. But Papi, is our bull going to die one day too? Because I have fed that bull. Papi just said, ay, idiota, of course the bull's gonna die. What do you think we brought him? Because our last bull died. And Papi was right. I turned 13, left for Philly. 2 weeks later, the bull died alone in the mountainside. So, bueno, Philadelphia Inn. I say to the bartender, I have searched every record store in Puerto Rico, in Philadelphia, and in New York subway system. I have sang this song to every radio DJ and cuatro player I know. And I can tell you for a fact, this song was never recorded. I say, por favor, do a man a favor, sell me this record. The bartender says, this ain't no record. And he points a fat finger to a dark corner of the shack, and my eyes adjust to make out the face. Maso Rivera, plucking away at his cuatro. Maso Rivera, the Ben Franklin of the cuatro. I mean, he put lightning into those 10 strings. And behind him, Ramito himself, the master, the voice that uses nostalgia like a goddamn machine gun, singing my bull song. I ran into my car, pulled the guido out from the glove compartment, and all night long, boleros, aguinaldos, and seis chorreados. I mean, people pouring into the inn, shouting requests, tapping their wedding rings on the counter in rhythm. Oh yeah, all the beers are on me. I mean, I'm seasick from the floor, swooping and swaying. And I say, Ramito, your voice has reached a new level of sadness. I mean, how do you cry like that when singing? And he said, they tell me the cancer is everywhere. In my earlobes, in my pinky, a few tumors right on my vocal cords. Then he tells me, I stay up all night holding a gun between my teeth. I say, Ramito, no offense, I mean, don't take this the wrong way. You're dead, aren't you? And he gives me a glance like, what can you do? And I say, Master Rivera. Don't take this the wrong way, but what year did you die? 2001, he tells me. And the next sex begins. Every medalla beer, I'm getting lighter and lighter. I'm sprouting wings. Except instead of feathers, it's beer cans. Which is how I got here, huh? Surfing a hurricane. Flying while intoxicated. To tell you this. Do not let those strings lie still.
What strings? Your broken cuatro?
There's a guy in Boston who does great repairs. There's a cuatro player in Barranquitas. He fixes them up like new. Mamita, do it for yourself. Get some Gorilla Glue. But if she is not played, broken pottery, arrowheads will bubble to the surface. Indian skulls, slave spines, and finger bones that signed the Declaration of Independencia. Philly will float out to the sea if those strings lie still. Jasmine, amor de mi vida, love of my life, bring her to me. Let me show you how the jigsaw fits together.
Yasmin goes into her closet, pulls out the broken cuatro, pulls it from the case, goes to hand it to Joaquin, but he's already gone. Jaime Torelli and Diana Boyer. Yes. All right, our second piece for the evening is from How We Got On by Idris Goodwin. This play was also developed in the summer of 2011 in the Playwrights Conference, and the play had its premiere just this past spring at the Humana Festival of New American Plays at the Actors Theater of Louisville. How We Got On is set in the 1980s, and it's a classic American coming-of-age tale with a unique hip-hop treatment, domestic suburban life remixed. The selector, our DJ narrator, samples and loops us through the lives of three Midwestern teen rappers who have yet to discover the power of harmony over discord. In this scene that we're going to see tonight, two young rappers challenge each other in the other's place of work, Pizza Pete's.
Dope as people say you are.
Huh?
You ever had a real challenge? Oh, I'm gonna count to 3.
And then what?
And we're gonna see who's dope.
This is my job. Don't come in my job.
1,
I'm serious.
a 2,
3.
4, to the 5, 6, 7, beyond. The queen has arrived to school, you peon. Eon centuries from now, they'll mention me, my feminine energy, my rapping ability.
It's okay.
That was fly.
It wasn't awful.
You're just jealous. Because I can rhyme better than you. Oh, what you got?
Dynamite, excite, explode, expose. Fake MCs, crack they code. Hold mic, pose. Foes get flattened, tossed like a salad. Crushed with a mallet, crack they whole cabbage. Do enough damage? You ain't a challenge, you baloney. I'm manwich.
Please. You about as hard as water. Fragile like your mama's China sauces. This super dope daughter. Super fresh rhymes. Super fresh style eyes.
Fresher, better, hella fresh to the letter. You wilted moldy spinach, you'll get finished. Strong like Popeye.
Not fly, you not. I transform Megatron, you bootleg GoBots. I stop the rhyme, then bust out the robot. Even got the devil saying, let him see so hot. Blew up your spot with the fresh raps. I got you laughing, but it ain't funny how I flow like snot. Don't need a beat, I rap unique right here in Pizza Pete's.
Wait. Hold on. Were you making that up?
Yeah.
Like right on the spot?
What, you've never done that before?
Yeah. Yeah, I've done that before.
Do it now.
What?
Do it.
Nah.
Come on.
What?
Are you scared? Oh, I don't roll with scared babies. I take back my offer.
What offer?
I thought maybe I could be in your crew. Since every crew has a rapper, a DJ, a human beatbox, and a girl.
What crew is a girl?
They all do.
Who? Girls are just girls. Salt and Pepper, MC Light. No girl guy, just girl acts and guy acts.
Well, it doesn't matter. Even if they don't have a girl, they want one. I take back my offer.
Hold up.
Yes. You want me to show you how? You ain't no MC. You're a poser.
That is Deanna Boyer and Brian Quijada. Thank you, guys. All right, our final piece of the evening is from the musical The Shadow Sparrow, book by Anton Dudley, lyrics by Charlie Sohn, and music by Keith Gordon. Performing tonight is Barbara Walsh and accompanied by David Libby. This piece was also developed in the summer of 2011 in our music theater conference. It has gone on to have a workshop at the City Theater in Pittsburgh. We describe it like this: a woman in search of fame, a man in search of the mother he never knew. Among the graves of Paris's famed Père Lachaise cemetery, each will discover their destiny. The Shadow Sparrow is a cabaret musical that reveals that sometimes those things we chase beyond ourselves may actually be found within.
Some girls like tasteful, some girls like quaint. Some think it's wasteful to flaunt without restraint. Some girls like jewels that obey all the rules, too small for others to see. Some girls, but no sir, not me. Give me a rock, a sizable block, so much glamour some will stammer while the rest gawk. A jewel that weighs you down so even walking is tough. I like my diamonds rough. Give me that ice, no matter the price. One so sharp a quick cut carpet with just one slice. A jewel that cuts your skin until you've had enough. I like my diamonds rough. So just dazzle and debeer me, make them loud so people hear me. Dress me like a sultan's shrine. The glimmer in my eye will make the style all the while. Baby, I was meant to shine. Give me a star that's big and bizarre, so much sparkle that the dark will seem quaint far. A light that leaves you blinder than a blind man's bluff. I like my diamonds rough. 2, 3, 4. Some girls like service, some girls like balls. Some girls get nervous without well-painted walls. Some girls like stores with hard marble floors, where jewelry is shiny and new. But I have a different view. Give me a stone that Fritz is my own, one that's stolen with a soul in ways that stay unknown. I value all my jewels for every scratch and scuff. I like my diamonds rough. Most girls pray that they'll receive them from a guy who'll never leave them, but I'll take my highs with my lows. And my man might not be stable, but our life is quite the fable. Even if one day he goes, give me a man who
Thank you, everybody. So I think we're going to transition into a discussion about things. So.
Indeed. So there's going to be a slight physical transformation of the space. If I can coax the actors into the audience.
Good? Okay. You'll look next. Oh, so nice to hear her voice.
So with that extremely easy act to follow, we wanted to talk to the people who make the magic behind the magic happen. And so if Wendy and Quiara and Anne and Paulette, if we could all take a seat, and I think we're all now on. We should just turn our
Oops, sorry. Okay, does everybody have, can everyone make a murmuring noise near their mic?
Hello.
So yes, lovely.
Murmur.
Murmur. Okay, great. So if at first we could just go down the line and you could give us your names and tell us your association with the O'Neill. So Wendy, the secret's out, but
Right,
yes.
yes. Okay, so I'm Wendy Goldberg. I'm the Artistic Director of the National Playwrights Conference.
Great.
I'm Quiara Hudes. I'm a playwright. My excerpt from Happiest Song Plays Last was the first among those 3 excerpts. So I was at the National Playwrights Conference. I also wrote the book for In the Heights, which a few years prior to that had been at the Music Theater Conference. So I've been to the O'Neill twice now.
I'm Anne Morgan. I'm the literary manager for the O'Neill.
And I'm Paulette Haupt, and I'm the National Music Theater Conference Artistic Director.
So my first question was actually for Anne, because the idea that you are getting 1,000 submissions, and okay, so you're making all the literary managers in the world help you, but when you are choosing, you can't just be choosing on the basis of excellence. There must be something that says to you, this is an O'Neill Center play. This is something that we want with us. So can you describe a little bit what that thing is? Because just from the outside, if we took these 3 as our guides, it would be musicality, because all 3 of them were immensely musical. But what is it that you know that you're looking for?
Well, one thing I can say is that our team of readers, even at the first round of the selection process, they're all familiar with what the O'Neill does in some way. So they know what the process that the playwright, if selected, would be entering into. Okay. And we also ask the playwrights to speak in their statement of objectives what it is that they would hope to accomplish. And we do sort of really just look for the excellence in the work, but I think when the playwright's hopes for the development of the piece and the reader's understanding of what the O'Neill can bring to a piece really come together, that is sort of what are the pieces that are most likely to rise to the top have in common.
Okay.
But I think stylistically, we do have a great freedom to sort of go all over the board, which is really exciting.
And this process, this 4-day intensive maniac process, it must be quite different for the musical program and for the straight program. Paulette, could you talk a little bit about what it looks like on your end of things?
Yeah, our process is somewhat different than Playwrights, although for both of us, the focus is very much on development. But all of the works that are selected, the creative team together with a director and a music director, sometimes musicians, and a company of equity actors, are in residence for a whole 2 weeks. And during that 2-week period, the first 2 or 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, some part of Thursday, is just frantically learning the whole score. But we have amazing cast through casting director who knows the arc of people's learning curves, and in the 3rd day you'd just be amazed. You couldn't believe that they had just seen the score for the first time on Tuesday. In any case, that first week is devoted to learning the music and then putting it on its feet in a very, very simple way, definitely script in hand. And it's before the public on Saturday and Sunday of the first week. And then, and during that first week already, a lot of rewrites take place. Then there's a couple of 3 days of more rewrite time, and in the second week they have 2 additional public readings over the course of the second week. So that is our process, which is a little different than the plays.
How long have you been there?
I got a call from George White, who's the founder of the O'Neill, and the Playwrights Conference by that time had been really well established. I got a phone call from George in the spring of 1978, and he asked me if I would come and help to start a model for composers and playwrights similar to the Playwrights Conference. And I said yes, thinking it would be a very wonderful, fun thing to do for a couple of summers. And I'm still there. So this is actually our 35th, we just finished our 35th summer. And we've developed probably, thank you. It's a wonderful place to spend a month every summer, let me tell you. It is paradise in terms of, it's a place where you just kind of shed everything at the door and you come in and you just enjoy why you got into the business in the first place. Collaboration and discovery.
And the musical form in the last 35 years has changed radically. Can you describe, I mean, perhaps, you know, it's like the frog in the pan doesn't notice it's getting hotter, but when you compare the conference 35 years ago to now, how have you seen it change?
Well, we did. My background is both opera and musical theater, and I was actually conducting at Philadelphia Opera at the time I was asked to come to the O'Neill, and many of the earlier works we did were operas, and so we're still very much open to them. The first opera, coincidentally, that we did was our first summer of adaptation of Desire Under the Alps. And the following year, an unknown composer, Maury Yeston, sent us 9. In terms of the scope over the years, oh yes, it's changed immensely. I think Sondheim has had an immense influence. The BMI workshop has had influence on so many different styles of writing and composing. Pop music and bebop and hip hop and all kinds of music are infiltrating into the musical theater storytelling. So that's one of the fun parts too, because in a general summer we do at least 3 works, sometimes 4, and they're just so different from one another. Yeah. I think what's changed more is we get more and more original work. Meaning not adaptations, than in the past, which I find interesting.
Quiara, you have been in both camps. Your loyalties are divided, I assume. And I wondered if you could compare the processes of the straight and the musical development process there, especially because the process itself, it does seem very mysterious from the outside that a difference could be made in such a short time. And so could you talk a little bit about being there first with In the Heights and now this more recent time?
Sure, and you know, it's just my experience. I'm sure if you asked any artist, they'd have their own perspective to bring, but I was there first with In the Heights and had been working on the musical with the composer and lyricist, Lin-Manuel Miranda. We'd been working on it together for about a year. And I would call those 2 weeks kind of whiplash-inducing, a lot of sleep deprivation, very fast and furious because of simply the magnitude of material to be learned. And what happens is, for us, was we made a lot of progress. We did a lot of rewriting. But it wasn't really until after we left the O'Neill that we said, okay, now it's time. Are we going to keep spinning our wheels and acting like a cosmetic change here and there is going to make our piece as excellent as we dream that it will be? Or are we really going to put our money where our mouth is and do the hard work now? We've heard it a few times. We got a sense of a few different audiences' energies. You know, are we going to really take real risks? And so it wasn't until after the O'Neill that the wisdom came, and we realized, but it was absolutely the work at the O'Neill that gave us this doorway into the insight. You know, we had to cut 2 major characters. In some ways, the piece was about those 2 characters. They went. So then, then we start from scratch. You know, it was about a love triangle then, and at the end of the 2 weeks, we thought, no, actually, we think this is a piece about a community of people, and that was a huge turning of a corner for us. So, you know, that kind of whiplash that we got, just furiously trying to learn the material and doing what I would call more cosmetic changes, led to a real eye-opener for us as young artists. Later, you know, even though it was only maybe 3 or 4 years later, I didn't feel so young anymore, and I went to the playwriting conference. And in the playwriting conference, there's more time, and there's also less material to learn. And that experience was much more about, there was time for the wisdom to kind of come in there, and that experience was much more about quiet and community for me. I got to break bread with a lot of other playwrights. I got to, you know, toss around the football with cast members, some of whom are here. And, you know, for a playwright, as a playwright, for me, you know, the quiet and the community are really nourishing for the soul. I think the fact that the O'Neill is on the beach, you know, we went to the beach a lot every day. So there's this built-in non-writing time that is just absolutely essential to real writing. And so that was huge for me. And I took what had been, you know, maybe a 70-page sort of more skeletal script and added some meat and some muscle onto the bones. Then I took it away and got a little bit of more wisdom having done that process. So I was commenting today that the script he had some new stuff in it from last time he connected with it, had some Gorilla Glue in it. So those are 2 of the distinctions I would make in terms of, you know, the character of the festival for me, of the festivals for me.
And Wendy, this is also for you, what is the nature of the changes? Because when people describe the experience of the O'Neill, it's always of this kind of, you know, they sort of get a little glazed and talk about the crashing of the waves, you know, or they talk about community. And it seems like a very supportive and safe place. But giving notes and asking an artist to change their work, even in a development process, can be very aggressive and can be very frightening to allow a whole bunch of people into a process that started as a private one. And so I was wondering, have you sort of found a best practices way to do that? Is there, and can you also talk about how it is to be on the receiving end?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think we continue to learn. You know, I think it starts very early, putting the right people in the room and really trying to have a conversation with the playwright about, you know, who the appropriate director would be. I mean, oftentimes when plays come to us, there have been some relationships that have started with directors, but often that has not really happened. That, you know, there's an opportunity there to have a conversation, to find the right type of collaborator, and then also adding in the appropriate dramaturg. You know, we have dramaturgs as part of what we do at the Playwrights Conference, as well as at the Music Theater Conference, and you know, really just finding the most sensitive, I think, but firm, firm but sensitive collaborators that I think
understand, basically understand what story, allowing the writer to tell us what story they want to tell, and maybe also allowing the writer to say, I'm confused about what story I want to tell, but these are the things that I'm interested and obsessed with, and how best can we get to the next step with the story. So I think that, again, having the right people around, and then because the writers are also, in our circumstance, are with us for the entire month, so they have this very intensive process for a week, and then they have downtime, or they have time where they can be reflective about what they learned, they can be getting prepared for when they go into rehearsal, but they have a lot of people around them that are incredibly supportive. We have no unsolicited feedback at the O'Neill, which has been very important for me. I think that now the culture of having the audience talk back and taking that time with an audience, that's a great tool if you're trying to build an audience relationship, but we're really trying to just build the story at that point, and so we don't need to worry about that as much. But what we do is we have very intensive conversations with the collaborators, and we really educate the community. We have so many students who are a part of what we do, who are just starting to be in a professional rehearsal room, and we talk to them about, unless the writer initiates a conversation with you about specific things, just be supportive, and that's just trying to create a good atmosphere for everyone to just feel that they don't have to defend what they're doing at all moments of the day, because we're all living together, eating together, so they're wanting to make sure that the environment stays supportive and a good one.
I would jump in too in terms of what terms for us. I invite people like John Weidman and Mel Marvin, Allison Horsley, who come in and see a reading cold. And then, in addition to my sitting down with the writers and telling them where I'm confused, we have an informal but very private session with these visiting mentors. And that discussion is not, okay, we think you should, Act 1 is too long, Act 2 is too short, you don't need this character, fix this, fix that. That doesn't happen. What happens is each of us tells the authors where they were on the train and where they fell off. They were confused, or they just didn't know where it was going. And then we let the authors themselves solve the problem of once they know that something they think is there isn't there. And that takes quite a leap in the next few days. And what's interesting is we do this the morning after the first reading and the third reading, which is in the second week. And very often, the same things will be said by different people 5 days later. And then it really reinforces, okay, that's something, I can't fix it now, but when I go home, I know what to do.
That's very reflective of my experience. Trust me, as a playwright, I have had plenty of experiences where just thrown in front of an audience, and the question is, how can she fix the play? And it's horrendous. It's truly horrendous. Excellent art doesn't get made out of feedback and conversations, and what I got to do both at the music theater conference and at the Playwrights conference was to listen. And I had a team of people listening with me. And it's the easiest thing in the world to say what doesn't work, and that has almost no relationship with knowing how to fix it. There's not a one-to-one relationship with it, and I was really glad that the O'Neill really got that. Because it might be completely clear to the playwright that yes, the end of scene 8, really loses focus and the momentum stops. And to have the conceit that therefore one has to rewrite the end of scene 8 and make it more active to fix the play is not how it works. In fact, it might be that the first 3 lines of scene 2 need to be rewritten for scene 8 to suddenly come alive. I loved that experience. I just listened to the actors every day. My dramaturg didn't come to me saying, this is where I'm confused, or she didn't come to me with feedback. She just said, what are you hearing? What's on your mind? And it gave me a forum to discuss when I was ready to, something not working about this for me. I have a hunch it might be about this unrelated thing. And so it triggered my own creative process and thinking. And one of the really wonderful things about the Music Theater Conference was that one of the things that's hard in creating musicals is that a lot of people giving feedback in the world are not musically trained. So this, even though the music is at the heart and soul of a musical, really a lot of the feedback still tends to be more dramaturgical in nature, but we had, for our feedback session, we had Andrew Lippa, who is a composer, is extremely musically trained, and so we were in the room and we were talking about, dramaturgical stuff, story stuff, but he was also talking to Lynn as a composer and just talking about a few things. He's like, look, you don't have a 3 meter in here anywhere, and so Lynn got all, I'm speaking on Lynn's behalf right now, but he got all up in arms about this. He was like, I'm going to show Lippa, I'm going to get some 3 meters in there, and it turned out that over the next 6 months, he that little fire in him, and he wanted to prove himself, and so one of the characters, whose name is Nina, her songs became, and we could not nail her songs. She got so many songs that got thrown in the trash, and they were good songs, and so he was like, she's going to be my 6/8 character. And it's through that, someone who knew the craft very well. That was a special treat that's not so common.
Yeah. Another question I had, which I'm afraid will sound perverse, so I apologize, is that it is a playwrights conference, it is a musical theater conference, it is about writers, it is about writing, and yet there is also a lot of very exciting American play work that comes out of group devising processes and strange weirdos like the Nature Theater of Oklahoma, who basically just eavesdrop on people's phone conversations and then write them down into fantastical, weird, Baroque events. And so how is there room for that kind of process at somewhere like the O'Neill?
Sure. Yes, I think there is. I mean, in the Playwrights Conference, we are text-based. We are always going to be text-based. Plays come to us that have text, they are submitted, and that is really at the core of what we do. And so, obviously there are other places that have developed along the way that are a home for this type of work that you're talking about. However, we do have this incredible educational arm of the O'Neill, which is the National Theater Institute, which I mentioned. We now have, it's an academic program for students who are studying theater intensively, and they come to the O'Neill for what would be maybe a semester abroad elsewhere, but they come and study theater intensively with us for either the fall semester or a winter, kind of into spring semester. We also have a summer semester as well. What I've been doing is having conversations with groups like what you're talking about, and in collaboration with the artistic director of the National Theater Institute, Rachel Jett, about how we can possibly offer a developmental home to some of these troupes that you're mentioning, and kind of seeing how we line up aesthetically and seeing if we can, maybe she often brings people in to do work with the students, but then also have their own sort of residency during the year. And so we know that the Playwrights Conference is going to always be text-based, but as you're saying, what are the other opportunities for developing work that doesn't necessarily come out of that tradition? And so we are just in the process of thinking about that, and we certainly have had and hosted groups that work in alternative forms. But during the month in the Playwrights Conference, it's trickier because we need a script. So but at the same time, we recognize that, and we are excited by that work. And I'm beginning to have more conversations with other groups, and thinking of ways to bring them in maybe during the year and support them in that way as well.
Because of course their process is also absurdly long. I think that's another.
Right.
Is that it will. The 4 days with them, they would have just gotten out of bed.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So because you are, all of you, seeing just a sensational amount of work, both in the application process and then also in the summers, this is difficult, can you point to trends? Can you point to is there a thing that American playwriting is right now, or that American musicals are right now? Is there a national character in what's coming to you?
Well, I certainly think this is an incredible time for playwrights. I mean, and I would say that maybe just in the last 5 years,
I see a lot more work that kind of harkens back to kind of more traditional form in some ways, kind of a more well-made play form. When I was seeing work, I'd say even 5 years ago, that was highly episodic. Not to say that that's gone, because it's not. But I would say that there are a lot of examples right now of work that has that kind of more traditional structure, and it's interesting to kind of reflect and understand why that's happening. But at the same time, not to say the other new structures that are being created continue to amaze me, and it's just been a kind of interesting shift, I would say. I thought we shifted away from that, and I feel like there's so many examples of work that's kind of shifted back to that, which is just sort of interesting to reflect upon.
And Paulette, do you see something which is a growing trend?
There has been some shift back into a more traditional music theater form, but what I'm finding in the last 2 or 3 years is I'm unhappy that we're not getting a lot of not funny pieces, but hopeful, happy pieces. A lot of sad work coming to us, or dark. I'm hoping that curve will change with the election or something. But
yeah, that could go either way.
I have seen that, and also there a much larger number of real political work. I mean, work that really addresses social issues today.
Really? Mm-hmm. That is also a return. That's also, it's like watching a pendulum swing back after
it really
20
is.
years.
And it really does kind of go back and forth every 3 or 4 years. It really makes a shift.
Yeah. And Anne, have you?
I would echo what Wendy and Paulette have both said. It's interesting that you mentioned that about not a lot of hopeful or happy work. I get a lot of phone calls from playwrights asking various questions about the submission process, the selection process. But I got one a couple weeks ago from a gentleman who had written a farce, and he was asking if he should even submit. If we would only consider dramatic work, and it does seem to be that the trend of very sort of serious work has sort of pushed hopeful, lighter work, maybe out of the consciousness a little bit. But we do see one of our finalists last year was a very true farce. But they are much more rare.
It might also be O'Neill in the title. You should maybe call it like the Wackadoodle O'Neill Center. Surprising the changes you'll find. I wanted to see, Tim, do you have a mic? I wanted to see if anybody had any questions for our panel. And if you do have a question, Tim's just going to give you a mic to talk into.
Yeah, thank you. I just have a question about, you get 1,000 submissions, so eight people get to go. So 992 people don't get to go, and I'm just wondering, there's a pretty hefty submission fee relative to some other places, is if there's any mechanism possible to give feedback to the playwrights who've submitted plays. Because you do send your plays out to readers. Is there any mechanism for that feedback to come back? Because I know when I get my rejection letters, I always feel like, oh, I wish I was getting something more than just a rejection letter. So.
Sure, absolutely, and that is a question we do encounter. It's our policy not to give feedback for this reason. We've said in your letter, we are not going to continue the journey of your play with you, and we don't want to give you feedback that's going to take your play in a direction that someone else might not want it to go. There are going to be people who want to go on the journey that your play is already setting out on, and we don't want to sort of cause you to stray from that journey. So that is sort of our primary reason for not giving feedback. We do make available to our readers the names of the playwrights that they've read after the whole process. If they do want to reach out to the writer, that is an option. But we don't give feedback to the writers.
It's such a sensitive process, and you spent a lot of time working on your play or your musical, and for a stranger, basically, to put in writing, well, this is what we felt isn't working. Just doesn't feel like the most productive way of doing it. And yet, to find another way to do that, then you'd really have to be able to do it for everyone.
The other thing I just wanted to mention too, that
to find a way.
Some of the pieces that have made it to the very end selection process, but have not necessarily made it into the conference, we are now asking those writers if they'd like us to put the names of the script, their name, on our website, and we then are sharing that information, which I think has been very successful. We're sharing that information with literary managers around the country, and so that's something we've started doing in the last couple of years that we hadn't done before, and that is a significant group. I mean, it's
about 40
it's
to 50.
a big group of scripts, so that information's out there. People know that it's been looked at highly and by some great eyes, and so I think that things are coming out from that as well, that discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. That finalist here, we are sort of able to sort of put the O'Neill stamp of approval, as it were, on them, saying these are works that really rose to the top of the process.
Right?
Hi, I'm kind of curious about what kind of instruction you give to your readers. I mean, do you just give them a blank slate and say go at it, or are there, is there a cheat sheet that they follow?
There is a cheat sheet. The two different selection processes have slightly different guidelines, but essentially ask for an overview of the story or the action of the play, a brief critical response, responding to things like plot and character development. The music theater selection committee also listens to some of the music, so they're asked to respond to that, and then a numerical score. So there are a number of different things that our readers give us that help.
Basically, we're looking beyond the excellence part, beyond the extraordinary talent or promising potential talents. We're looking for work that is complete enough to be on its feet in front of an audience, ready to do, but still enough significant work to be done that it's not ready for production. So with my readers, I ask them to kind of highlight, is the structure, does it have legs? Is it pretty well structured, or, and specific questions like that. But then in general, do you recommend this work at this time or not, and why? And then just a few words from them. Not a critique really, but just a gut response.
Does that mean that you occasionally get pieces that get such a gold star, you're like, we couldn't do a thing, it's perfect, it's flawless, and so it's wrong for you in that way?
That's actually happened. There have actually been works that there's really not that much to do.
Yeah.
And it seems unfair to select that one over something that really also has great promise, but has plenty to do still.
Yeah.
I mean, I've actually sent so-called rejection letters or thank you letters saying, we don't feel there's nothing to do here. I mean, really good luck. It's a wonderful piece, but yeah.
Here's a couple of producers' names. Get out there. Wonderful. Did anyone else have a question? Yeah. One sec. Just Mike.
I'm curious what the approach to scores that are not necessarily piano-based is like.
We're very open to them. Very open.
How are you able to work with that in 2 weeks, if like a music director is mainly a pianist?
Well, good question. I mean, in a way, we haven't actually worked on anything that didn't have a piano in some way. But if something came along that there was a solution that we could find that would make it possible for the composer to hear the music and for the cast to learn it, it's difficult in a 2-week period, but if we can find a way, we would. Don't know if that answers exactly, but...
That actually, two of the things you've said have made me curious. You said one is that you're interested in maybe finding a way to take this immense amount of work that's being put into reading these plays and maybe in some way finding ways to I don't know, not let it, sort of close out at the end of the process. And also that you're looking for ways to incorporate non-piano-based scores. Are there other things that you kind of dream of as being the future of the O'Neill? Like what are these sort of, what are the pie in the sky, other than changing the name, obviously?
I know for our conference, you mentioned, musicality off the top, and there's so much of what we're looking at that, I often will read the beginning of something and they'll talk about, I want a live band, and, it's a play with music, and it has different, and again, when you come to the O'Neill, we can do things very simply. We obviously can't provide a live band at the Playwrights Conference, but, we try to come up with ways to address that, and also try to figure out maybe, should we not even touch that this week? Or, how else can we do something to help kind of give that sense? Or are we the right place for this? Because we can't. So those are always really interesting conversations. A lot of what we're looking at is crossing over all over. A lot of things are hybrids these days. They're not purely one or the other. So I think, and projections. Everyone has projections. That's the other. We do that, though. We do them, and it's interesting to see them at the O'Neill, because you see, if that ends up being the kind of primary scenic element you want to spend time on, then we'll do it. You'll see what that does. But again, having the conversation about what's at the core of the idea and how best we can then support it remains really important to us.
Yeah. For us, it's such a luxury that the Playwrights Conference has, and I hope that maybe someday we will have it too. And the reason is, availability of housing and tradition, because it started with the Playwrights Conference. But we don't have the luxury of being able to offer the playwrights and lyricists to stay on and, or come the whole month and work for 2 weeks before you even go into rehearsals, or do your piece first, and then you're still in this idyllic place to muse. So that's one thing that I hope to see will change as the O'Neill grows in terms of the grounds and housing and all. The other thing I would really love to do to eventually incorporate, and that would mean having to have them there longer, would be to incorporate an orchestration element where either we had a small orchestra, why not think big, or at least orchestrators like the design, dream designs, and to talk about the orchestrations of the work. And because you can do so much electronically today, perhaps create some different possibilities and really look at the other musical color and language of the piece.
That'd be great. That would be amazing. Does anyone else have a question for our panel? Yes.
Would you please elaborate on the O'Neill's relationship with other producing organizations, such as the Goodman, and why the Goodman? And then I also wonder about other development programs like the Lark, because I imagine that you deal with many of the same scripts. So I wonder, again, just what is that relationship like?
Sure. I think for the first time in history, just in the last couple of years, there's someone.
That just means someone's phone has gone off.
Okay.
Chuck Hughes. It could be mine. Let's be honest.
We've started a kind of task force that the Mellon Foundation has supported, where all of the kind of major developmental labs in the country, it started all of us talking to each other and really figuring out what we all do and really hearing our narrative from each other and really understanding that, so that we can then, maybe what we do at the O'Neill would not necessarily serve something. The Lark experience would serve something better. The Playwright Center experience, Sundance Lab, whatever it may be, and kind of understanding where we're all coming from and how best we can support each other and support artists in the middle of it. And so then beyond that, those conversations are ongoing, and we all share, we all talk about finalists. A lot of these programs, like I said, we're the oldest and the first, but so many of these happen right on top of the O'Neill in the summer. So when Sundance gets close to making their final decisions, or Playpen in Philadelphia, or if someone's going to go do Play Labs, we in Minneapolis, we have conversations about what we're all looking at and making sure that we're not denying someone an opportunity, or we're not vying. We make sure that the artists can move forward with that. So that's what's happening developmentally with development organizations. Now, in terms of producing organizations, we are often looking for, if we're going to invite somebody in and invite a producing organization to work with us, it's very limited. It's only 1
slot, and it doesn't even happen annually. It's always, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. But what I like, again, I'm also a director and have worked at a number of these places, and what's been great about working with Goodman, and one of the reasons why I've enjoyed that collaboration, is that I like the way they produce. They produce big work, epic kind of scale work that we wouldn't necessarily be able to always support, a 25-person cast. I mean, that's probably large, usually like 15 or 17-person cast. That would mean that I'd have to do all the rest of the plays would have to be much smaller sizes. But with Goodman's contribution, that helps kind of offset that a little bit. And I love their work. I love what they do. And they also are an organization that doesn't have capacity at their producing organization to give something a week workshop. They just have too much going on. So they come to us and we work with them on that. And it's a long relationship I've had with Bob Falls and all of those sorts of things. But again, it could be another one. We keep the conversations open, and if something came up that made more sense, certainly we'd go there. It's really, that comes into focus. The open submissions are what come into focus first. And then beyond that, we have these additional conversations and see how else we can kind of broaden what we're looking at that particular summer, depending upon what comes through open submissions.
So if there are no other questions, I will say slowly, giving people time to gain courage. No. We are going to now, there will be yet another physical change, and then we'll have a short, very informal reception. Please come up and speak to the panelists, maybe crush on the artists a little bit. That would be really important. That's what I'm going to be spending some time doing, is telling them how incredible they are. And join us for some wine and conversation. And thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for being our first event of 2012. Thank you.